What do you imagine when someone says Axis? Conquering entire countries and island chains in mere weeks? A mobilized totalitarian state willing to sacrifice everything to achieve victory? A competent and fashionable military that only vastly superior good guys can defeat? Maybe a genocidal regime keen on eliminating every minority possible? Luckily for everyone, none of this is true for the so-called modern
axis of evil.
They are not as determined, they are not as cartoonishly evil, but more importantly, they are nowhere near as competent. The problem is, their main opponents, the democracies often referred to as the West, are even worse. We'll talk about new Axis determination and repressions in a later video, but today I want to focus on their competence, since it is the main point of difference with the old one.
Helicopter, helicopter!
The new Axis simply can't compare to the old one. Well, maybe it can, but only with Italy. North Korea is basically a medieval nation with famine, sometimes even little, that just happens to import Chinese nukes. The Ayatollahs are fighting Iranians more than the Vestoids they swear to oppose, and West Taiwan shot itself in the foot by limiting fertility so much that its population started declining. An observant person can check the GDP numbers, population growth rates, sometimes even death ratios, and come to a conclusion that the anti-Western coalition simply doesn't have what it takes to, well, oppose the West. Probably the most vivid display of that, and for power for any nation, is war. As with such high stakes, the governments usually try to do the best they can, and as of now, there are at least 4 instances where the new Axis members showed that their best is disappointing. The Ukraine war is the prime example of that. Russia followed the best practices set by its predecessors. Militarize early, train your troops on bigger enemies in proxy wars, bite your desired target a bit so the complacent West won't act, then achieve the surprise effect, launch a full-scale invasion and get wrecked? Like, this isn't even funny. Germany and Japan, yes, I will continue to ignore Italy, lost their wars, but they had at least something to show for it in the beginning, and they were campaigning against far superior opponents, not far inferior ones. This really shows how enormous the gap in competence between the Ukrainian and Russian armies is. If we judge by the balance sheet alone, the Russians should have eliminated the Ukrainian armed forces multiple times by now, like they claimed they did. They wanted to cosplay America in 2003 war in Iraq so much that they forgot that they aren't as competent as Americans, and Ukrainians aren't as incompetent as Saddam Hussein's troops, not to mention that Russians don't have the air superiority here. But what about NATO aid? Basically the entire West is fighting Russia through Ukraine, you may say. Sure, technically all of NATO countries and even some non-NATO partners, about 60 nations in total, assist Ukraine in the treacherous act of defending itself. This mighty coalition contributes a staggering, mind-blowing, unprecedented 0.25% of their nominal GDP, or about 1/400th of their annual economic output. If we translate this into human terms, it would be even less than lifting a finger. Imagine stopping your opponent with just a stare. That's how little effort the West spends on Ukraine. Unfortunately for Ukrainians who just want to avoid subjugation, and unfortunately for Russians who want to believe that they are dismantling the current world order by taking yet another completely ruined village with a pre-war population of 3 people. But the most ironic point is that it's actually Russia that got more foreign help than Ukraine. And I don't mean foreign by geography, although North Korea put more boots on the ground than Ukrainian allies ever did. I mean, surpassing 0 is not a big feat, but 10,000 people is still quite a boost. The main benefactor for Russia is foreign by time. It's your favorite military factory masquerading as a country, the Soviet Union. Despite the Russian arms industry contributing only 60% of the Union's production, Russia received about 80% of its military equipment. The value of tank inheritance alone is about $500 billion, more than the entirety of aid Ukraine got throughout what soon will be 4 years of the war. By the time this video reaches your screen, Ukraine will have endured Russia's assault longer than the lifespan of the Eastern Front in World War II. The speed of the Russian advance is roughly the same as that of the Western Front in First World War, and the collapse of the Ukrainian army is nowhere in sight. The wars that should have signaled Russia's grand return as a world power became the graveyard of the Russian imperial project, as the Eurasian bear loses its influence in the former Soviet Union and beyond, while also accumulating human and economic costs of war. While Russia's defeat is strategic, and you can even cheer the bear on by focusing on the victory part rather than Pyrrhic, the situation with other new Axis members is so one-sided it isn't even fun. Actually, it bloody hell is. In Iran, Israel and the United States just waltzed in, bombed the shit out of it, and went home like they were fighting the classic terrorist group, not the third biggest member of the scary new Axis with presumably existing and supposedly modern anti-air defenses. The Venezuela situation is even crazier. It seems that even Somali militia suffered more resistance to the US forces during the Battle of Mogadishu. Yeah, the one that Black Hawk Down is based on. And those militias didn't have state-of-the-art Russian anti-air systems, unlike Maduro. And while the new Syrian government is arguably more pro-Turkish than pro-Western, it is by no means pro-Russian, thus terminating its connection to the new Axis. It also hurt Axis pride a little. After all, the Assad regime that Russia and Iran nurtured for years crumbled in what, about 2 weeks? The old Axis conquered most of Europe and East Asia before it lost. It seems that the new Axis, by contrast, is a stillborn power, whose sun sets before it ever truly ascends. So the new Axis isn't really strong. Then why fear it at all? Well, mainly because the Axis enemies, while being far more potent, have even less political will. The democratic world is 3 times bigger in nominal GDP and 50 times bigger in GDP with purchasing power parity. The same is true for military spending, and that's a point in favor of democracies as they are far less militarized on average. While the new Axis has Russia with about 5% of its GDP spent on the military since 2000, many Western nations still can't pass the infamous 2% target. And they still do better militarily. That's very unlike the 1930s situation when the Allies started militarizing right before the war, while the Axis was already prepared, which allowed them to gain much success initially. The new Axis shouldn't be scary, but it is, because the lethargic West doesn't want to get out of its comfort zone. Imagine sitting on a random sofa in a random hub in a power armor. There are people around you and some crazy maniacs come and start attacking them while shouting that you are next. And instead of doing something, you just express your condolences to the victims. After all, you are just too lazy to stand up and don't really care. The cutthroats remove everyone for living and start poking you, and only after that, you beat them up, and the sofa and its surroundings stay somewhat safe until the new challengers arrive. You might have dealt with them before they K-worded everyone and bruised you, but you chose to beat up a random guy who just stared at you for too long and buy a new Red Cola bottle instead of repairing your armor. That's basically how the West acted before World War II, and that's how it still acts today. It just never occurred to me before that democratic countries might have been involved in the most stupid Brotherhood of Steel cosplay ever. Truly a sad state of affairs, but it is what it is. In the next episodes of the new Axis series, we'll talk about how different its determination and oppressions are compared to the old Axis. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. A small channel update. I burned out and was super lazy last 6 months, so this channel was dead for a while, but now I will be back with 1 video per month at minimum. And I didn't forget about the How Communists Destroyed Russia series. They're just longer and harder to make, so the next episode will be out in February.